How's it going, guys? My name is Zach with the Movie Castle, and today I'm really excited because we're going to be talking about Fragments of Horror. This is by horror manga legend Junji Ito, and it's a collection of 8 short horror stories, and these are really great. I believe this was the first short story collection that Viz put out in English, and it's because of this one success that we got a whole bunch more, and now we have a ton of his stories released over here, and that's really good. In this collection, you get a bunch of characters that are really put through the ringer in these crazy, intense, messed up situations, and as, you know, it should go without saying, they often end in really weird and bizarre, striking visuals, Junji Ito's classic style, and just so many stories where, you know, the concept is just something you think about over and over again after you have read them, just going, man, that's a really messed up place to put a character. And overall, very memorable stories, very memorable villains and visuals, and it's overall really good. I read in the afterword, apparently this does have a direct Japanese parallel. Sometimes the short story collections are individual groupings that, you know, only we got over here in the West, and in Japan they're released, you know, in different, you know, collection assortments, but apparently this does have a direct parallel. And in the afterword, Junji Ito said that he wrote these stories after not having done short horror for about 8 years or so, and he said he was kind of, you know, worried about getting back on the wagon and getting it right, and like his old editor who he worked with really well had died, and he was like, can I do this without him? But it really is one of his best collections, and I really do like it. You know, he definitely built up a really good body of work here, and actually I didn't know this going in, but apparently this is considered to be one of his best, and the fans kind of argue between Fragments of Horror and Shiver as to what's the best English language release of his work. And I really do love this, and it is a tough battle, but I gotta go with Shiver. I mean, Hanging Blimp, The Long Dream, the visuals from Shiver and Fashion Model, and plus Shiver's longer. I mean, that's just an easy way to measure it. But anyway, this is still a really great collection, and lots of really cool stuff in here. And I think without further ado, I want to show you guys the book a little more specifically. So I'm going to go to the close-up camera, I'm going to show you the physical release, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about each story. I won't be doing any major spoilers, so don't worry about that. I'm just going to try to give you the setup, you know, the hook. But however, cutting out major spoilers does sadly mean losing a lot of those reveal shots, and I know a lot of people just want to see Junji Ito's endings, you know, the messed up crazy art. That's not going to be this video, but I'm sure you can look it up pretty easy because his crazy endings do get to be shared. So just know there is more intense visuals in this book than I'm going to show you, because a lot of times those intense visuals come after a twist. So anyway, if you want to see this book in a little bit more detail, let's switch to the close-up camera. Alright, here we are inside the castle, taking a closer look at Fragments of Horror by Junji Ito. And yeah, I do really like that logo. As with the title, it is fragmenting. You can see the G starting to crumble there. Really nice. Goes up, half in black, half in white. Really cool. And then the cover is just really great. You get the character Tomio there, and he's kind of doing a parody of The Scream, the famous painting by Edvard Munch. And he is holding his hands to his head though, for a very different reason. We'll see when we talk about the story. But really nice, wavy lines, striking colors, orange, blue, the red on his turtleneck. Really cool, but also this cover hides a ton of references to things that happen in the various stories in the book. this bird character from a story. These eyeballs on the wood from a story. So that's always really nice. And if we flip it to the spine, we find that they lined it up so that one of the eyeballs is right there on the spine, so it's going to be looking at you on your bookshelf. That's really cool. Black-white logo there. Anyway, if we flip it to the back, we get this little blurb about the stories. We also get T+ for older teens, and $17.99 US. That's a pretty good price. $17.99. I've seen American paperbacks go for that much. Granted, these stories are in black and white. That probably saves a fair bit of money there. But for a book that is over 200 pages, hardcover with a nice dust jacket, this thing's got a ton of production value for just $17.99. Really do gotta love that. But anyway, on the back cover, it all connects all the way around, and we get to see a couple more of the characters and things from the story. And I guess I should mention right away, sorry I had to do a little bit of censorship. It's hard to say what YouTube's going to flip out over, and I really do work hard for these videos. I don't want YouTube to flip out and take them down, but yeah, that lady is clutching that thing for some reason, and you have to read the story to find out why. But we also get this little kid running away, and if we open up the dust jacket, we see he's running away from this little girl with a scalpel in her hand, and we also get the main character from Gentle Goodbye, her portrait hovering above the water there. And on the other side of the dust jacket, I'm gonna go and just slip it off, we do have the fortune teller character, and she is done in this blue-gray color, and we can pull the whole thing off and see the very nice panorama. Really cool stuff. But you may notice, I don't know how well it shows up on video, but there's a gloss difference on here. There's actually a hidden image inside the sheen. What is that? Well, it's actually the same image that's printed on the book itself. Now, I do want to say there are some women here. Again, in regards to YouTube flipping out, you can't see anything. But anyway, you get this woman lying, looking up at this crazy, surreal scene. And yeah, this is a very different, very dark and creepy cover for the book. And we get to see this crazy, intense moment, which does come from one of the stories. So we'll get to that in a little bit. Let's crack open the book. We get a bit of that panorama below the table of contents, and we see the stories are Futon, which is actually only from page 3 to page 11, so not a very long story at all. Still really good. Junji Ito actually does really good work in really short formats. Futon, Wooden Spirit, Tomio Red Turtleneck, Gentle Goodbye, Dissection Chan, Blackbird, let me see if I can pronounce this right, Magami Nanakuse, and Whispering Woman. And then after that, we get this afterword on page 222. So yeah, over 200 pages in this book. But I do want to show you guys a little bit of that afterword. Well, first, the credits here. We can see first printing was in 2014 in Japan, and then first English printing June 2015. So yeah, it only took a year to come over here. That's really good for official manga translations, only taking a year. But let's flip to that afterward. This actually is one with a direct parallel in Japan. Sometimes the story collections don't always line up from Japanese to English, but this apparently does have a direct parallel. But he talks about Junji Ito here from April 30th, 2014. He says, I stepped away from doing short stories for about 8 years, and he says he looks back on that time and says, what was I doing? I was drawing a weird cat manga, which I'm sure we'll cover on this channel eventually, I hope so. But he's like, I was doing all this other stuff, I had been away from short stories, and then my editor, who was a very good friend of mine, died, and he has to get back on the horse, but with a different editor. And he says the editor, he turned in his first draft of the first story, and the editor was like, we're gonna need to work on this one. And he was wondering, oh man, can I get back on? Can I still do it again? And well, we can tell from the end product, yeah, he can still do it again. He still got it, but he does talk really open and honest about having to get back in the groove of things. And I really do love finding out about the media that we're consuming, you know, a little bit about the story, you know. And then there, with Dissection Chan, we actually get the about the author segment. Anyway, after that, let's go ahead and talk a little bit about the stories. Again, no major spoilers, and I'll be avoiding the twist, which sadly does mean avoiding some of that really cool art. But anyway, no major spoilers. Let's talk about the stories, beginning with Futon here. And Futon, we meet Madoka and Tomio. And Tomio is afraid for some reason, and he spends all his days hiding under his bed. Under his blanket, rather. And there he is, peeking his eye out, and he says, can't you see that over there? But of course she doesn't see anything. Madoka has to go to work and earn money for the both of them. And then one day she's lying in bed at night, and she looks up, and she actually does see that wraparound cover image. So that's the context of that, is suddenly she sees the crazy, forbidden, and hidden world that's been driving Tomio insane. And once she sees it, Tomio is going to open up about why exactly he can see it, how he screwed everything up. And overall, it is a really good story. Kind of short, though, so after the reveal, the story wraps up pretty quick. But like I said, Junji Ito can work pretty well in a short format, and it's only, I believe, 7 or so pages, but we get a ton of cool stuff in that Lovecraft-esque visual of the hidden world. Really reminds me of that the Lovecraft story From Beyond, where it talks about how there are hidden aspects of our reality that are just there and we just don't see them. Turned into a really good movie with Jeffrey Combs. Anyway, after that we get the story Wooden Spirit, and we get this mysterious lady clinging on to the rafters of this house. Open that up. We get the first page here. We can see the nice house, and it really is a nice house. And we meet the people living in it. This girl and her dad, who is by himself, and they talk about how this is their family home. They've lived in it for forever, but it's actually a really old, really nice house, and it's become a historical marker, and they're going to open it up to the public and give tours. And she says, I like the house, it is really nice, but I don't particularly like having to show other people the house, having them come in and intrude on my personal space. So even though the story is going to get wacky and horror-esque, it does have a very real-world founding of, I don't know how comfortable I am with people being in my house. Well, right off the bat, someone comes to the door and says that she's an architecture student and wants to look around the house. And at first, the daughter wants to turn him away, but the dad says, no, she can come inside. And they give him the tour. Man, this is a really nice house. If this ever got a movie adaptation, I would really love to see the house that they chose for the movie. That would be really good. Just, I would love to see this in real life, so hopefully it does someday. But the lady starts to talk about the house, starts to talk about how beautiful it is, and she goes around touching different parts of the house, and then she makes a comment about the floorboards. She goes, they're very sexy, which is a strange thing to say about a stranger's house, and there's her looking up at the rafters. Boy, those are some big rafters. But she has a very strange deal that she proposes with the father. She says, I really love the house, I want to spend more time in it. Can I live here? I'll do chores for you. So they give her a room, and she starts to do all these chores around the house. You know, here's her cooking. And the daughter doesn't really, like having her there, intrudes on her space, but at the same time, she does do a really good job. But as time progresses, the father falls in love with her, and they get married, and now it seems she's never going to leave the house. Well, yeah, you know how she's a stranger, you don't kind of know what she's up to? Well, let's just say a little bit after they get married, the daughter walks in on the new wife in a very strange position, let's just say. You knew she was up to something, but I don't think a lot of people would guess that she's doing what she's doing. A very strange and surreal reveal, but then after that reveal, it triggers a very intense Junji Ito moment. So, sort of a double twist there, that's what she's up to, and then, oh my gosh, now this is all happening. And I wish I could show you the art, but that is definitely falling into spoiler territory. But yeah, really cool ending to that story. After that, this next story has a little bit of a cold opening. We see a man walking around a Japanese town, clutching his head. Now, why is he doing that? That is sort of the mystery and the hook of the story. But yeah, this is Tomio Red Turtleneck. And you may recognize that name, Tomio. Yeah, this is a story about Tomio and Madoka again, who we saw earlier in the very first story. However, this is a separate continuity. It's sort of like, hey, here's these two characters again. How about, what do we see if Tomio can get them all in trouble a second time in a completely different story? Well, he's walking around with his red turtleneck, keeping his hands on his head, and he knocks on the door. He has to use his foot because he can't move his hands, and he says, Madoka, you have to take me back, you have to help me. You see, by this point in the story, Madoka has kicked him out. They went to a fortune teller to learn about their good future together, but the fortune teller says they're incompatible, and she steals Tomio away from Madoka there. Later on, they're lying in bed together, and she will actually pull out one of her hairs and begin to wrap it around Tomio's neck and pull really hard and squeeze. She'll say, I want your head. Now, of course, she gets pushed off, and Tomio looks in the mirror and says, oh man, that left a mark, what are you, crazy? And she goes, oh, just wear this turtleneck, this white turtleneck. But then after that, she wants to show him something. She leads him down this hall, and that's where we get the first crazy messed up reveal here is, turns out she quite literally wanted his head, and we get to see all these hanging severed heads that she's collected, and we get this really fun visual of her in the sky laughing, and he's down there running away. However, that turtleneck is still white. What's going on there? Well, it turns out she slipped her hair into the neck lining of the turtleneck. The hair contracts and starts to cut off his head, and the bleeding is going to turn the turtleneck red. But the thing actually does cut off his head, but at the last minute, Tomio puts his hands on his head and is literally holding his head in place for dear life. And now we're all caught up to the present. That is such a concept. The idea that, you've just managed to hold your head in place. Any little shake might undo the nerves and you could literally die if you move your hands too much, and keeping your hands on your head the whole time so your head doesn't fall off. Ah, man, that's a lot to unpack, and they do have a ton of fun with this story. The witch comes over and plays a ton of games trying to just mess with Tomio there. Oh man, that's one of the concepts of this story. of this collection of stories. It's just one of those that you remember for a long, long time after you read it. It's pretty fun. Anyway, after that, we get Gentle Goodbye. The two look at each other, the coffin, the ghost behind them. But anyway, Gentle Goodbye is another story I really like. Now, there's not as much crazy, messed up Junji Ito visuals as in a lot of his other stories, but man, this one just has a ton of weight behind it. You get this girl, and she lost her mother early on, and in turn, she has all these bad dreams about losing her father too. And yeah, that sort of intrusive thought, really, really scary that you can just constantly be thinking of something like that. But eventually, she grows up and she gets married, and she moves in with her new family, who are, for some reason, standoffish to her, and she doesn't quite know why. She's introduced to the older members of the family that couldn't leave for the wedding, and when her husband says how old they are, she's really surprised that they're still around at such an incredibly old age. Well, later on, she's walking through the house, and she sees a strange, ghostly figure. So yeah, sort of a ghost story there. There she is up close, and we can see through her. Well, she gets scared, and she runs away. And you know that old couple they talked to earlier? Well, she can see through them as well. This house is full of ghosts, and when she confronts her husband, well, they're not really ghosts, and it's kind of hard to explain what exactly they are, but later on, another person in the family dies, and they all get together for the funeral, but after the funeral's over, they create an afterimage. So, yeah, we get to find out what all these things are around the house. You see, when someone dies, everyone in that family gets together and prays really hard. We see the smoke come up, and the person comes back to life as an afterimage. They say it's not a ghost, it's an afterimage, and we don't really know if it's literally the person or just a construct of all our memories of that person. He even suspects it may just be a shared delusion. But yeah, so basically, whenever someone dies, they pray, and they get this afterimage of the person, and eventually, over the course of 20 or so years, the image will start to get a little foggier, and then fade away completely. So yeah, you do start to lose that afterimage after a while, but 20 years, you know, it gives you ample time to make peace with that person not being there, so by the time they're gone, you're more ready for it. And he talks about how there's all these different afterimages of all these different people all around the house, and some of them are really starting to go, and some of them are there, but you can just barely see them anymore, and they'll start to fade away and disappear. A very, very poignant story. You know, the idea of, you know, how hard it is to move on without someone. Lots of weight here. Again, you know, it's not so much a crazy Junji Ito visual, but boy, the story has a lot of weight to it, and it's got a really nice, sad ending too. And overall, I really do love that one, even though he's not drawing some crazy monster with 14 eyes or anything like that. Oh, but then, hey, here's another one I love. Up next, we have Dissection Chan, and we get her with her scalpel and scissors there. And this story, we open up on a medical school. There's their dissection room, and they're like, okay, kids, if you want to be doctors, you got to learn about the human body. We are going to do a dissection. And your main guy there, his group gets a dead body, but it's a young and beautiful woman. And, you know, what are the odds that they would get someone who died so young? Most of the other bodies are very, very old. However, he looks closely and notices the eye is just slightly open. It literally peeked. And he calls the professor over, hey, doctor, I think our cadaver is still alive. So the professor pokes it, manages to get a grin out of her, and she pops up, her eyes pop open, and she's like, "Ah, man, you guys figured it out. What are you doing? What's going on?" And she goes, "Well, I'm here because I want to be dissected. Please dissect me." They, of course, say no, and she streaks out of there, but they can't find her anywhere on the campus, so she did get away. But then we get this little hook. Was that "it can't be"? And then we find out the rest of the story. So the idea of someone literally trying to be dissected, that's pretty messed up. But it turns out it goes further because when he was just a little kid, he actually knew this girl, and he goes, "Hey," the girl goes, "Hey, let's play doctor." And she says, "I need you to steal one of your dad's scalpels." And there's her holding the scalpel, and she brought her own frog to dissect. And we get this really messed up bit where she kind of, forces him into this, saying, "Hey, I'll tell your dad you stole the scalpel, and you'll be in big trouble." And they start to cut open this frog, and it hops away, and the two of them start to dissect little animals, and this is getting really dark. And of course, rumors start to get out, and they start to call the two of them Dissection Chan and Dissection Kun. And yeah, the two of them have kind of a reputation of being weirdos, and he really wants to get away from her, and eventually in the past kind of would, but here she is showing up in the present again. Wouldn't it be great if my first friend would be the one who dissected me? So yeah, a classic case of someone who's just really out there and really messed up, just kind of haunting you. There is a ton in this story, and it does end on a really insane moment. After that, man, there's just a ton of good stories in here. After this, I feel like I say this for everyone, but this is another really good story. We get Blackbird. In this one, we get this guy, he randomly decides to go out hiking, and when he's hiking, he finds this guy who has fallen down and broken his legs, and he can't get out. So he, of course, helps the guy out and gets him to the hospital. And it turns out this guy doesn't have any family. He's all alone with no one else in the world, and the two hit it off and become friends, and the guy offers to stay the night with him in the hospital. However, when the sun goes down and it gets really late at night, he sees something quite strange. Let me flip the page, kinda. There we go. You see, it had always been a question in this story how he survived so long, and he said, "Oh, I just had enough food in my backpack." Well, in the middle of the night, he sees a mysterious figure hunched over the guy he saved. She turns, and man, that's just such a, the face being a little off, but then it's literally all blacked out except for her face. Such a weird and crazy creature. It stares at him and then runs off, and he's left going, "What the heck was that?" And the guy on the bed spits something out. It's this wadded up meat, and they're like, "Okay, what's going on?" And he explains that he was dying without much food, and he saw someone in the woods, thought he was safe, and it turns out to be this thing, and it's chewing something, and the thing goes up to his lips and literally baby birds some food over to him, and then walks away. And he says, "Yeah, I was stuck in the middle of the woods, and this strange creature, in a gross way, kept me alive. And now, even though I'm not in any trouble, she's still coming back." And that's such a weird, just the visual alone is pretty crazy. But the idea that this strange being would be trying to help you in some weird way, it's just such a bizarre thing. You know, how do you come up with that? I won't spoil it, but the ending of the story, you know, kind of having the narrator not be the guy who's in trouble. He has to, of course, find a letter to explain what happened toward the end because he's not there for it. And the reveal is one of those things that I'm like, okay, you know, it's a bizarre reveal as well. And you're like, I guess that can be what happened? Oh, okay. You know, so the ending of the story and the explanation for what's going on is pretty strange, but I guess that's a good thing. But yeah, it's a really weird Junji Ito story. Definitely sticks in your head. And up next, here's one about a book author, and the title of the story is the name of the author, Magami Nanakuse. Sorry if I mispronounced that again. But we get this girl, and she's obsessed with the writings of this author, and she has all the books. Now, the thing with this author is she specializes in quirky characters, and this girl's such a fan that after she reads a story, she tries to take on the quirks of the characters in the story. And, you know, it's like, hey, look at me, I'm special, I'm being quirky and weird. And she writes to the author and actually gets a response, hey, bring your work, let me check it out. And she is freaking out that she's going to meet her favorite author, but it's in a weird place in the middle of nowhere. And we get the person who meets her is this really old person, and they explain, oh man, you came all the way out here to, I think it's Kushki, and that is a place where terrible things are just drawn, and like terrible things just happen to happen in this place over and over again. So it's a very strange place for a writer to live in. But she meets the writer, and yeah, a case of maybe you don't want to meet your heroes because the writer is instantly going to be rude to her and catch her off guard. You know, again, being gross there, picking her nose right off the bat, and then just insane verbal teardown to really get her to break down. And then she lifts up her head and says, hey, let's drink together. I have a very big collection of alcohol. And you see the thing that the author's doing is she says that she's the quirkiest of all. She writes about characters that are weird and quirky, and she wants to meet people that legitimately are, but the new girl, she's like, oh, you're not really quirky, you're a faker. And they start to drink, and the new girl says, hey, I can prove myself, I can drink you under the table, and I can prove that I'm a legit quirky person. And the two get drunk together, and the writer says, maybe you are really quirky, maybe there is something to you. And when she's passed out, the writer says, maybe you're real, let's take you to the dungeon. Which is, yeah, that's a twist on top of everything. But the thing with this story, you know, is you get, you know, it really is a commentary. You get Hollywood or writers or entertainment in general, like think reality TV. They really start to take characters that are a little weird, and if that's you naturally, if that's just who you are, then okay, yeah, that's who you are. But you get her, and, you know, the writer accuses the other person of being a faker, but she really is the biggest faker of them all. She's just doing this to get attention, and it's like, you know, hey, I'm not naturally this way, but if I'm quirky, then I get your eyes, I get your attention, and she's literally kidnapping legitimately quirky people and putting them in her books. And we get this fun sequence where the townspeople, the higher-ups, are inviting her over, and they're all mimicking whatever she does. because they're just kind of glad that they're getting an attention from a famous person, and it gets pretty bizarre. But yeah, we cut to our main character there, literally in prison, so that they can find out how quirky she can be. Again, a story that does have real-world weight behind it. There's so many bad behaviors in the media that are just like, hey, how can I get eyes on me, even if that means, you know, being unauthentic, you know? And there is a lot to unpack and analyze with that story, I think. But anyway, after that, one of my favorite stories in this collection, I really do love this. This is Whispering Woman, and you get her whispering behind this girl. And this story is one of those concepts that, oh man, when I realize, I'm like, oh, this is what we're talking about. It's a really great, just messed up concept. I do love it. You get this girl, they're a very wealthy family, and the mother's died, and after the mother dies, the only child is left with insane indecisivity. Like, she can't decide even little things. What should she do? Go right or left? Should I sleep? Should I not? Should I sit down? And if I sit down, in which position? And we get a caretaker coming over, and the dad greets her and says, I have a very strange job for you, but if you can start right away, I really need your help. And essentially, the daughter has to be told very clearly what to do all the time. And like, he's gone through a few different other people that have all quit because it's really the constant need for directions. You have to be with her all the time telling her what to do, or else she'll freak out in indecisivity. And boy, yeah, I tell you, if you are in any little bit indecisive in real life, this story can really hit home with you. But she goes and she starts to guide her and tell her every little bit very clearly what to do. And she is really, really good at this job and gets her throughout her whole first day. And the dad's like, that's really great. And she is really dedicated to this job. And the dad's like, maybe you should take some time off. And she goes, no, I want to do this. And it's really, it does get to, you know, the whole, man, I said this when I talked about Marionette Mansion back in Shiver, but the idea of how much, you know, control you can have over your life, and the idea of someone else there influencing things for you, that is just, yeah, there's a whole bunch to unpack there. But as, you know, they start to go about it, she starts to get good at it, but to the point where maybe it's too good. You know, the dad is there with his business associate, and the daughter walks in, and you can see at first the hand peeking out, but then her, and she's just whispering at this point because she's talking for so long, her voice would go really hoarse if she wasn't just whispering. But there she is, right behind the daughter, whispering in her ear, guiding her with her hand, and the daughter will start to act just like a regular, normal person. You know, there she is, smiling and talking to her dad. You know, if you couldn't see her behind her, she would just look like an average, everyday girl. But it's because she's got the woman whispering in her ear, telling her exactly what to do at every step of the way, and, you know, walking out of the room with that lady behind you. And you can see doing this for like 16 hours a day is really taking its toll on the Whispering Woman. But then after that, we do find out why she's so eager to take this job. And boy, dark and home-hitting twist when you find out why she's doing what she's doing, why she cares so much. And it does have a real punch there at the end. And yeah, lots and lots of weight for that story. Anyway, Dust Jacket back on. That is all 8 stories talked about, and some really good ones in here. the Tomio story with his head coming off, that's just crazy. And the whispering woman there at the end, and Dissection Chan wanting to be dissected. There's so many stories. Oh man, the visual from Blackbird, I just saw her up there and I'm like, oh yeah, there's some crazy stuff. But this is a collection with a bunch of memorable stories. It is one of the shorter ones, being only 200 pages, and although that being said, only in 200 pages, how often do they go together? But I really did blow through this thing pretty quick. Viz also puts out the short story collections, Junji Ito story collection, and those are a lot bigger, you know, so I'm already reading through my next short story collection. There's just so much to like with Ito's work, so many times where you don't know what's gonna happen. And that's the thing, is so many stories, you know, there's a bunch of stuff that, you know, we've seen it before. Oh man, there's this trope again. But not Ito. Ito, you go into one of his stories, and so many times where I'm left thinking, how does he come up with all this stuff? And I really do like originality. I really do like not knowing where something's going. And I really do like creatures and visuals that you don't get any other place other than Ito, and it's so good. So yeah, definitely would recommend this story collection. It is one of his best, and I've already cracked open the next one. I love this stuff. Anyway, to everyone who's watched so far, thank you for watching. To everyone who's liked and subscribed, thank you. You really are helping the channel out. I'll leave a relevant playlist on the bottom. This should be my Junji Ito playlist, where you can see me talk about Shiver. I talked about the movie adaptation of The Long Dream, and there's a few other things in there as well. The new one, The Liminal Zone, I talked about that, and I'm going to be working on filling out that playlist as time goes on. Anyway, have a good day. I'll see you guys again very, very soon. Junji Ito playlist on the bottom. Have a good day now.